Mike Oram is a lifelong experiencer. He's actually an amazing man with an amazing story, and he joins us now. Hello, Mike. Welcome.
Hi, Dean. It's nice to meet you. First time that we have met, I believe.
Yes, through a mutual friend, actually, Mary Rodwell.
Rodwell, yes, great friend of mine.
Yep. Mike, first up, you're a lifelong experiencer. It's been a long journey. Can you tell us just a little bit about it in a condensed fashion before we get into, the main bulk of the questions?
Yes, I could give you a quick condensed version of some of my more major experiences just to give people an idea, because we probably won't have time to go through all this because it would take a couple of hours. Things like what happened to me when I was 4 years old, a major experience I had at Star Hill in Warminster, which was world famous in the 60s and 70s for UFOs, and people came from all around the world. I had a meeting there with my space brothers, other experiences there, a strange stone that I found in unusual circumstances. When I saw a mothership in November 1969, and I arranged for a craft to come in 1970 for my dad to see, because he couldn't accept what was happening to me, and I asked them to come, and they did, and that was quite a moving experience. The TV space message that came on the TV in 1977, where the forces that be, if you like, tried to put this blame onto us. I think they were using it to get at us. The 2 hours of missing time at Area 51. The funnel experience, where I met the light beings. The portal that opened along the lane where I lived in my last place, where I was offered the chance to go back home. And something that happened which isn't in my book on my 60th birthday, where a very strange experience where I was told telepathically to go outside with my large camera, with my large external flash gun on the top, and start taking photos, and I did. And I've actually got some photos that could flash up on screen if we do get to that point.
Okay.
One which is the being who I call the tulip people on the front of my book.
Yep.
They've got to be altered because my artist friend at Danham, he put the two outer wings out too wide, because it was more, I called him a tulip person because these folded up more, and it reminded me of a tulip head before it flowered. So that's the sort of things that some of the major things. Obviously, there's loads that I've missed out.
Well, speaking with Mary Rodwell recently, and she's a good friend of yours, and she told me a brief version of the story that really, really fascinated me when you were 4 years old with your mother, and you told us something interesting. What was it?
Yes, it was. I was 4 years old. It was 1955. I was born in the East End of London, as you could probably tell by my accent. Although I left there many, many, many years ago, I've still got my Cockney accent. We lived in a tiny terraced house in the East End of London, a place called Stratford, where the Olympics were held in 2012. And myself and my sister and mum and dad lived upstairs. It was like what they used to call a 2 up and 2 down house. And my aunt and her family lived downstairs. It was all open plan. I was standing in the living room, facing my mother, and we were just generally talking. Now, what people used to say, when I've told this at conferences, some people have said to me, how could a child of 4 use such terminology? Well, the thing was that when this experience happened, I could see us, you would probably say in your third eye region, I could see these images, but words came along with those images that enabled me to use them. So the words I'm going to use are the actual words that I used when I told my mother. But we were talking, and I suddenly just stopped, and I said to her that there was no such thing as death. And she said, well, of course there is, Mike. She said, when you die, you die. And I said, no, you don't. I said, I don't know how I knew this. I've never seen a graveyard, but I said, you dig a hole in the ground and the body goes in and it's covered over with soil, but the universe goes on forever.
Mm-hmm.
And for us to never take part in that universe again does not make sense. I said, we have to come back. And then I went on and said to her, and also, Mum, you are not my real parents. And she was quite shocked, stepped back. She said, well, of course we are. You were born in this house. And I said, you're my real parents as far as bringing me onto this earth, but my real parents are out there in space. And I pointed up to the sky. If that wasn't enough for my poor mother to deal with, I then said to her, something of incredible importance is going to happen on this planet that will affect all units of consciousness, whether it was mineral, vegetable, animal, or man. I said, not in your lifetime, Mum. Now, she died about 24 years ago now. I said, not in your lifetime, Mum, but in mine. And down the years, with further and further, more and more experiences, etc., and as things unfolded and my spiritual journey and the experiences of that, I came to the conclusion at a very young age that there was going to be this grand shift of consciousness. There was going to be some major planetary event that would shift consciousness of all life forms on this planet. And I think we are in that now.
Right.
It's almost like we're in a sort of Armageddon. It's like this final battle with light over dark, with the powers that be. But I think what will happen to us, we will come out of this raising our frequency.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, I talked to my mother for the next, right up until she died. You know, it never left her memory. And we'd sit round a table and she'd bring this back up again. And we would talk about it. So I think it certainly made her think. She had experiences as well.
Yeah. Well, as a star child, Mike, when you pointed up in the sky and were telling your mother you were from out there, do you know exactly where?
Well, yes, and I don't normally mention this, but I will tell you. Now, I come from. It's a bit misleading when you name a star system, because it's not like we see a star system, a few stars,
Mm-hmm.
and not much else. But I come from the Sirius system, what we would call the Sirius system, but it doesn't really mean anything. That's just a name that we give to a few planets that seem to make some sort of formation, etc. But it is from the Sirius system, and that's where my space brothers, who I first met as a child and still do, that's where that area, but they're not in a 3D experience.
Right, right. So you choose to come to Earth and live out life as a human?
I came here, like many thousands of people on this planet, to help with the shift of consciousness. This is what I've been doing and talking about most of my life. Right back in the early 70s, I was talking about this event that would happen, and this grand shift of consciousness for all life, including Gaia herself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Talk about your space brothers. Who are they, and do they protect you?
Yes, they have. Yes, he did tell me once, especially with the Area 51 experience, that I had to stop. And these were his words. He said, he said, I had to stop sticking my nose in where it doesn't belong. He said, because we cannot be here to protect you all the time, and you have to just be a bit more sensible. And there has been earlier incidents as a child where he turned up and certainly helped me out of sticky situations.
Right, right. And your space brothers are from the same system as yourself?
From that area, but not in not in 3D.
Okay.
They
All right.
tend to be in the higher dimensions of 5D, whereas the light beings that I've met are way, 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 way above that.
Right. We're, we're going to touch on parts of the book, Does It Rain in Other Dimensions? And I'd like to tell viewers, if you get a chance to read one book this year, read it. Does It Rain in Other Dimensions? And I wanted to talk about your experience. You talk about in the book about a tiger that used to visit you.
Yes, I did. They still do actually. Um, it it used to stand at the bottom of the bed from about the age of 5, 6 onwards, and it would be sideways on, and its head was always turned towards me. I sensed, even at that young age, that it was some sort of guardian, and I used to call my mother into the bedroom, and I would say to her, "Look, surely you can see this tiger. It's here, as clear as anything." And she would say, "No, I cannot see it." And one day I called her in, and I was lying on my belly on the bed, and I said, "Look, my fingers were, I could have almost touched it, but I knew that I shouldn't touch it. There might have been about an inch away from it." And I said, "Look, I could touch it now. I could touch it.
Mm-hmm.
Surely you can see it." And she said, "No, I cannot see it." But I knew that it was a guardian, but it was from an experience much, much, much later in life, when Telos, my main space brother, that got got us out of Area 51 and other tight situations. Um, he told me that he was that tiger, and he came in that form because it was easier for me to accept to see an animal rather than him at that point. Although I did actually see him for the first time when I was about 7, as far as I can remember. That's the earliest memory I have of him coming into the house.
Right, right. Could, could you, did you think about what your mother was thinking herself when you would tell her the things that you could see? I mean, was there doubt in her mind? Did she say to you, don't talk about things like that?
No, my mother didn't, thankfully, because nobody else in the family have ever questioned me or talked or asked me anything about my experiences. Even when the book came out and other things and conferences and I was on TV and radio back in the early days, no one wanted to know. My dad, who did have an experience, which made me think that perhaps he did take on board a bit more than I realised, but he perhaps couldn't deal with it. Whereas my mother, she was always there to listen, and sometimes she would say to me, "Well, I've seen things as well." But when I used to say to her many, many times over many, many years, and I mean, even when I was in my 30s, I would say to her, "You know who I am, Mum." And I said, "Just tell me what you know about it. You know who I am." And she said, "Well, I don't know what you're talking about," she says. And then she would always end it with herself, talking about herself. She would say, "I'm the 7th child of a 7th child." And it used to end there.
Yeah.
Now, I haven't put in my book, but I am willing to talk about it now. I didn't put it in the book because I felt uncomfortable about it. It's about these implants and something strange that happened when I was younger. And my mother obviously, she must have known something about this. But if we've got time, I can talk to you
Hmm.
about that.
Right. I just wanted to
But
touch
before
on,
just interrupting you, she saw craft herself. She'd actually tell me that she did
yeah.
see flying saucers.
Okay. I spoke recently with Dr. Melanie Barton, who's been a lifelong experience, and I wanted to talk to her about her experiences as a child and if it affected her at all at, say, you know, when she went to school, and did it affect her ability to mix with other kids and communicate with other kids, or was she more of an outsider? And she actually was an outsider. What what was your experience?
Well, I learnt young in life that you didn't talk about this stuff, and until I was 17, and something that happened then, um, I thought I was the only person in the world that met people on strange aerial craft and actually communicated telepathically with them. And I say it wasn't until I was 17 I realised there was a lot more, but we might talk about that experience anyway if we've got time. As far as integrating into school, it was a pretty awful secondary modern school anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I was stabbed twice at school, really, because I refused to fight. I don't like violence,
Right.
and it didn't seem to go down very well. But you learnt to really only talk to people that you knew would be prepared to listen. I
Yeah.
did have friends, but they were a selective few, and my friends tended to be the gentle children, and some of those suffered at school as well. I had a normal upbringing. Apart from that, it was like living in two worlds. We used to
Yeah.
play lots of football. I'd go fishing, etc., etc. But you just didn't go there with this other stuff.
Right. Talk about the experiences you had when you used to wake in the middle of the night and you were whisked away. Where did you go and who were you with?
I mean that's a long story because it's gone on my entire life. But I can give you a brief outline of what happens. That when you're going to be taken, or if somebody is going to be visiting you and you're asleep in bed, you always wake up. What I do, always wake up instantly, and you're never dreary or a bit tired. You've got to come round normally. You wake up and you're totally alert. It's like a different part of the consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So when I wake up like that, I know something is going to happen. I can then start to sense either people around or sense that something is about to happen. And then if I'm going to be taken off, lifted up, frequency change, it starts with a buzzing in the head, quite mild at first. It gradually increases in tempo, and then it starts to go through the whole body. And your body it ends up vibrating incredibly fast. Now, I've read, obviously, I've researched this for over 60 years, but I've read a lot of people who said they don't like that lift off, that buzzing, that frequency change. I absolutely loved it, even if they
Mm-hmm.
might not have been the good guys, because a lot of the time that I was taken, there was a lot of stuff to do with the greys and taking sperm.
Right.
Um, but the frequency reached a crescendo, and then I would just lift off. It seemed like I was going in my physical body, but sometimes I think I went astrally. But most times I changed the frequency of my body, and I would go straight through a window or straight through the ceiling, and you'd see a light up in the sky, and you would go shoot straight up to that. Now, it's once you went into that light, that's when they would shut down your conscious awareness,
Right.
which is incredibly frustrating. A couple of times I woke up. One particular time I, I woke up suddenly, and there was two people each side, two greys each side of the bed at the bottom doing things. Um, and there was a taller one right near my head, but he was looking at them. He must have suddenly been aware that I was awake, and his head spun round, and he looked almost in shock that I'd woken up. And he put his face right in front of me, and all I could see was these two large black almond eyes, and I immediately went back into this unconscious state. So when I'm going with them, there's not much that I do remember. It did get to a point in my 30s and 40s that I was being taken 3 or 4 times a week. And at,
Wow.
and at the time, in the end, I said to him, look, you've got to stop doing this because this is really wiping me out. And shortly after that, it started to peter off. And I thought it was because I said to them, you've got to stop it. But because of something that happened a bit later on when this implant was taken out of my back, which I think it was an implant, I think it might have been more something to do with that, the tracking device, because they used to try all sorts of tricks to get me outside sometimes if they weren't just taking me. Like they'd wake me up and tell me to go and look out of the roof door. I was up high, top of this building where I live, and I looked down into the car park. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and there was my neighbour was standing out there looking up at my window, the window in my
Yeah.
door.
Yep.
And I thought, oh, it's Simon. So I waved to him, and he waved back. And then I suddenly thought, can't be. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. What's he doing standing there looking at me? He was going like this for me to come out, you see. And all of a
Yep.
sudden they realised that, and this grey's head suddenly shot round the other side of the glass door right in front of me, looking at me, telling me to open the door and go outside. And I managed to sort of not go and went and made a cup of tea instead. So
Yep.
there's all sorts of weird things that
Yeah.
used to happen.
I was fascinated to know these particular visitors that you had. Would have they been aware that you were a star child? You're actually from another system, you know?
I think undoubtedly they must have known that I was from another system. Whether this was decided or not before I come here, I don't know. What were they interested in my sperm because of my connection out there? Because I know they do follow genetic lines.
Right.
So I would think yes, they did know.
Yeah.
But meeting my space brothers is a totally different
Yep.
experience.
Yep. I posed a question the other day and got a lot of response about what would be the first question anyone would ask an ET if they were taken. And I mean, would it be about life, about the universe and what it all means? I mean, did you ever get a chance to communicate with these visitors?
I did communicate with Telos, yes, and he told me a lot about the frequency change and mainly about my life, etc., etc. I don't meet him that often. He won't just. I can't just arrange for him to arrive. He only comes if it's absolutely necessary, whether it's necessary for me or necessary for him.
Mm-hmm.
Like the time in Area 51, if we do get onto that, that is a long story. When I was taken up, after I was rescued, I was taken up into the craft, a huge craft.
Well, let's talk about Area 51.
Right, well, okay. We went there in February of 2004 to go to the Laughlin UFO Congress conference. And we'd arranged in between the 9 days of the conference that one of those days I'd hired a car to go to Area 51, and we sorted out a day to go. We left Laughlin about 8:15 a.m. It's about 160 miles to Rachel,
Mm-hmm.
and our first stop, we stopped at Alamo at about 11:50 a.m. And from there, it was 48 miles to Rachel and 25 miles to the Groom Lake Road. And we done that. We got to the Groom Lake. We stopped at Alamo. We got to the Groom Lake Road. It was 14 miles driving down that dirt track before you got to the famous barrier. Well,
Yep.
a non-existent barrier, but plenty of signs telling you not to take photographs or make any graphic representations or whatever. And my partner Fran, she stayed in the car, and I said to her, look, and there was a military truck just off to the right, 2 men in looking down. I said to Fran, I haven't come all this way from England to not take just one photo. So I said, what I'll do, I'll take a photo and we'll do a quick 3-point turn in the car and we'll zoom off and go to Rachel. I mean, the thing is just, it's so isolated out there. We've read a lot of stories about how aggressive they can be if you even put one foot over this imaginary line, etc. And because I've done that and done a 3-point turn, and I hit the gas pedal and we started zooming back up Groom Lake Road, but quickly followed by a truck. And this, whether it was the same truck or another one, it was possibly another one because of what was on the back of it. But I could see it in my rearview mirror, and I said to Fran, we're being followed. And she said, yes, I can see it in the wing mirror. And then we heard this sound, and Fran just said, what was that? It sounds like we've been shot. I stopped the car, took me about 5-10 seconds to get out, looked down. The first thing I noticed was it was 10 seconds tops getting out of the truck, out of our car, but this truck in absolute open flat area for goodness knows how many miles, it was nowhere to be seen, and that really puzzled us because where could it have gone in 10 seconds? And this was I looked down and the tire had exploded, so perhaps it had been shot. Now, this was the ideal place to put on a spare wheel because it was a wide open dirt track and it was flat. But then I had this strange feeling that I had to drive over the desert sand and try and get to Medlin Ranch, which we knew roughly the direction because we downloaded a Google map before we went to the US. And I drove over that. Now, we got to Medlin Ranch, which isn't really a ranch, it's a compound with a high wire fence around it. Now, the interesting thing is we arrived at that imaginary line at about, I think it was 1:15. We left about 1:25. We drove the few miles, not many miles, to Medlin Ranch. So we should have got there about 1:45, something like that. But when we arrived, I said to Fran, look, it's 4 o'clock, it's getting dark, we've got to get this wheel changed. So somehow we've just lost just over 2 hours. We both studied ufology for, say, 60 years. We know what signs to look for, but it didn't register in our mind at all that how could it be 4 o'clock and how could it be dark? Jacked the car up, took the wheel off, got the spare wheel out, which was what they call a donut tire in America. And it's read the handbook and it said don't drive more than 50 miles an hour and don't drive too many miles. We was putting it on and I was tightening the last 2 bolts up and my back was starting to ache, and I asked Fran if she could just tighten them up. So while she was doing that, this truck suddenly appeared, didn't hear it come, it just suddenly appeared around the side of the compound, parked, and these 2 men got out with this little boy. One man was about just over 6 foot, tall and slim. The other one was shorter, about 5'10" and stocky, and this little boy. And all this little boy done was stared across at Fran. And I can pick up energies of people, and I could not pick up this energy. I could not recognize what it was. And I thought the reason he was staring at Fran, perhaps he was a bit shy, he looked about 11 years old. Anyway, but when they came up, when they got out of the truck and stood in front of us, the tall man, he said, looks like we've arrived too late. Now, I thought he meant to help us change the wheel, but later on I found out it was to rescue us from where we'd been taken. And then he said, what do you think of our weather? It was really strange, 2 strange questions really, but the second one was. And I just said it's much the same as what it is in the UK. We're both coming out of our winters. And then I said to him, now, where's the best place to get this tyre changed? And he said, well, there's a place at Rachel, but he'll probably be closed now. You can go back to Alamo, he said. You might just about get back there before the garage shuts. So I said to him, what direction is it to Alamo? And he said, you go that way. You go that way, he said. And so we went off that way. They zoomed off in the truck. We went off that way, but it was the wrong way. We should have gone that way. He sent us on the road to Rachel. So when we got at the famous black, now white mailbox of Medlin Ranch, we were now closer to Rachel than Alamo. So I said to Fran, well, look, we wanted to go to Rachel. We'll just have to drive there, get something to stay overnight now, and we'll drive back in the morning. As we entered Rachel, we drove through this quite a fierce snowstorm. As we come into Rachel, there only seemed to be this little shop called the Quick Pick Shop, and then Rachel, Little Ailey Inn. So we went into the Quick Pick Shop. Bearing in mind, there's nothing out there apart from these 80 mobile homes that people lived in, and a lot of them, I was told, worked at Area 51.
Yeah.
And went into the Quick Pick Shop, and I said to the lady, can I ring the AA, explain to her what had happened. I said it's a free phone number. But looking around the store, we thought this was bizarre in our conscious mind. There was nothing on the shelves. You know, you might have got like a packet of biscuits, and then there'd be a long gap, and there might have been a packet of tissues or something. It was odd, and we did actually comment on that. I rang the AA, told them where I was, and they said, well, I've got a map here in front of me. She said, I just can't work out where you are. So I told her again. She said, no. She said, I cannot work out where you are. You're going to have to drive to Las Vegas. And I said, well, I don't want to drive on this donut tire. She said, well, you're going to have to. So I put the phone down, and the lady in the Quick Pick Shop, lovely lady, she said, you can't do that, she said, because we're so high up here. She said, if you get a puncture in that donut tire at night, there won't be anybody around. I mean, it said in the local brochure I got from the tourist information place that if 12 cars went along extraterrestrial highway in one day, it would constitute rush hour traffic.
Wow, yeah.
You know, and she said no cars pass. She said, I broke down 2 weeks ago in the daytime. I sat by the car for 4 hours, and eventually a military truck came along and helped me. She said, if you have to stay overnight up here in your car, you'll probably die of exposure. So I said, well, if I ring the AA back, can you speak to him? She said she would. She explained it all to them. They said they'd bring out another car. It's going to take them 6 hours, so they'd be there about midnight. And she then said to me, look, I'll shut my shop and I'll take you, follow my car, I'll take you along to Little Ailey Inn and I'll get you booked in there. So she walked in first, we followed. She went up to the counter where there was this booking in book. She turned it around and looked at it, and she just suddenly said, young lad behind the counter, why have you put them in there? We were already booked in. How? Because we'd just turned up. And the lady said, why can't you put them in there? He said, no. He said, I've been told they've got to go in there, which was all rather odd. I stayed behind to pay the bill, and wait, and Frank and the lady from the Quick Pick Shop, she got the key. And I said to her, what, do you work here as well then? Oh no, she said, I help anybody. And she did seem that sort of a person. She had the key, and she took Fran across to the mobile home place. And as she was walking across, she said, there was a man turned up just before you. She said, we don't know who he is, but he's been put in the other half of your mobile home. And she said, the toilet's in the middle. She said, there's a connecting door you've got, and it's got a bolt on it, and I suggest you keep it bolted. And
wow.
Fran came back and told me this, and I said, well, that is very odd. We had something to eat, took some photos, and we went back to the mobile home, and we were just lying on the bed, and we suddenly heard this man come out of his connecting door, and it was like he was walking across and standing outside ours. It happened about 3 times. So in the end, I said to Fran, look, I said, get down, get on the floor and see if you can see under the door, because there was a big gap under the door. And she got down and had a look. She said, yeah, he's standing right outside. So I said, well, I've had enough of this. So I flung open the bolt, opened the door, and he was standing there and he had a dog. And I just said to him, all right. And he said, yeah, all right. And I said, nice dog, and stroked the dog. And then I shut the door on him. But the odd thing was, like Fran said, he looked just like me, in the sense that he
Wow.
was the same height. He had a long silvery hair like mine, tied at the back. And she said it was like looking at you. And anyway, he came out another couple of times, and we just ignored it. And then the truck come with a new replacement vehicle, and he said to me, "You made the right choice," he said, "because for this last 160 miles," he said, "I haven't seen a single car." He went, I came back in, and I said to Fran, "Right, well, I'm going to try and get some sleep." And then Fran said, "Well, I'm not." She said, "I'm going to lie on the bed, fully clothed, with my shoes on, ready for a quick exit." I didn't say to her, what quick exit? Quick exit from what? We weren't aware of any of this, missing time or anything. And I said, "Well, I'm going to get into bed," and I did. But I woke up about half hour later at 1 o'clock, and I was going to be sick, and it was imminent. I quickly got dressed, opened the front door. There was snow outside, and I thought, I can't be sick here because we've got to step out of here in the morning. So I thought, I'll go round the back. So I run round the back, and I thought, I'll go to the far end. So I started going to the far end, and there was this little window, and I thought, well, that's probably where that chap is. I can't start like vomiting outside his bedroom window or something. So I came back and stood at our end of the mobile home, and I started to be sick. And after the first time I was sick, I lifted my head back up again, and this huge craft came over and hovered over the top of me, a little distance up.
Yep.
And I was sick another 2 times. When I finished being sick the third time, it moved off. And I rushed round to the front of the caravan, but burst through the front door, and I said to Frank, "Quick, come and look at this light before it goes." And she managed to see it heading towards the horizon. And then I turned to her and I said, "Well, you might have at least come out to see if I was all right." And she said, "Well, what do you mean?" She said, "I did go out there. I couldn't see you." I said, "But I was round the back." She said, "I went round the back. You weren't there." She said, "I called out your name in this back car park area. I went to the front of Little Ailey Inn. I called out
Mm-hmm.
your name there." She said, and I thought to myself, "I bet he's wandered off somewhere. His back's gone, and he's collapsed in some ditch or something, because that's just the sort of thing he'll do." And then I said, "What did you do then?" She said, "Well, I went back inside." And she sat on the edge of the bed, and she said, "I just sat there really, really worried." She said, "I don't even drive a car. We're up here in the middle of nowhere, and I don't know where you are." And we decided at that point that I said, "Look, if one of us wakes up and it's light, we're just getting out of here." And I think we were awake about 4 o'clock. So we got in our car and started driving back along that terrestrial highway. And we started talking about the things that we could remember. And the two men who got out the truck with those strange questions. And I said, "Well, yes," I said, "but that little boy," I said, "he was really, really odd. He had a strange energy." And she said, "What little boy?" I said, "The little boy that was with him." She said, "There was no little boy." I said, "Yes, there
Wow.
was." I said, so she said, well, what was he like?" So I told her, and she said, "Look, I'm a trained nursery nurse." She said, "Don't you think I'd see an 11-year-old boy 6 feet in front of me?" I said, "Well, yes, I would. But there was a little boy." "Well, what did he do?" I said, "Well, he got in the truck with them when they drove off." So that was another strange thing. When we got back finally to the hotel in Laughlin, we had to register for the conference, and we registered, and then I said, "Well, perhaps we should go and have a shower and freshen up." Fran went in the shower first and came out. She said, "Look," and she had this quite a large red triangular mark on her arm that felt like sandpaper. It was rough, and she had three long fingerprint bruises on the top of her leg, long thin fingerprint bruises, and she had these marks on her ankle. I said, well, I'll go and check myself, and I had 3 marks in a triangular fashion on my ankle. Other things went on there, but I'll try and cut it a bit short. But no more really happened. Well, there was there, but that would be in the book. But eventually, we got back to England 2.5 weeks later. I sent the photos away. Didn't have a digital camera then. When they came back, we were looking at the photos, going through them, and I suddenly said to her, well, hang on a minute, how could it have been 4 o'clock and dark? It should have been about 2 o'clock. So at that point, I thought, we've got to find someone that could do some regressions. And we did find a very nice man who come up and stayed with us for 5 days at a series of regressions, Area 51 and other stuff. But I mean, very quickly, under regression, when I thought that I got out the truck of our car in 5 to 10 seconds, and their truck was nowhere to be seen. It was a different, under regression, it wasn't like that at all. These military men suddenly armed military men surrounded our car, and they got us out of the car. And on the back of their truck was this strange thing that I said it looked like a cannon. I said it was a cannon because it had this long tubular bit and what looked like a wheel. But when I went down the other side, being led by the military men, there was no wheel that side. So the chap that was doing the regressions, he said, well, what do you think it is? Now, I said it's a magnetic pulse generator. Never heard of a magnetic pulse generator. I don't know why I said it. And he said, what does it do? And I said, well, it's a portable portal maker. It can create a portal. And it did create a portal. And we were forced at gunpoint to walk through the portal. Now, I'd seen one of these when my space brother, near where I used to live, opened a portal, and he said I could go home. He said, you've done enough good work, and you can go back home now. You won't suffer any karma. You've done what you come here to do. And I said I couldn't go because I wanted to continue helping people through the shift. But going back to this, it was this very similar looking portal. But as soon as you stepped through it, I mean, it's really weird because you can see the desert behind it, but as soon as you step through this sort of hazy, like egg-shaped thing just off the ground, when you step through, you're just somewhere else. Now, it looked to me, and this is what I put in the book, it looked like an underground base. There were these rooms, there were military people, there were these machines all around the walls.
Was it Area 51 itself? Was it the...
Well, that's what I felt. I had no way of knowing, but I mean, I was at Area 51 when the truck chased us.
Yep.
So I assumed it was. And these men had no interest in me at all. They were working on the machines. And when I was asked under regression what these machines were, I said they were all to do with consciousness. And as soon as we drove onto the Groom Lake Road with the sensors and that they've got in place and other technology, they knew straight away that I was a contactee, and they wanted to know what information I had and what I was doing basically there. And they put something on my head, which was to get the information out of my brain or wherever it was residing. Fran started to panic and fight them, and then she was forced onto this sort of metal gurney thing on wheels. That might have been where she got the bruises. And at that point, there was this consciousness that appeared, and this consciousness was so vast, so incredibly powerful. It was like an umbrella. It covered the whole of the area where I was. And then I heard him saying telepathically, no harm must come to this man, and you must put him back where you got him from. Now, I actually think if that hadn't have happened, we might not have even come out of Area 51. I really don't
Wow.
know. But we found ourselves back by the car. But when they put us back into the car, one of the military men had a little box on his belt. He'd done something to it, and it like put us in stasis for about 10 minutes. So when we finally came to and got out the car, it wasn't 10 seconds later, it was 10 minutes, and that's why we never saw anything.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was being sick and that craft was above me, what actually happened was a beam of light came out. I was lifted up, and I've experienced this before. I was lifted up on this beam of light into this huge craft with a huge hangar inside. And I've been on this several times, and there's different exotic vehicles on this huge machine, and a balustrade that I was walking, being led along. And I went into one room, and I was absolutely shocked because it was my space brother Telos. And we had a conversation, and he was just telling me a bit about how it was going here for me, etc., etc. But when it was time for me to leave, he opened up his hand, and using his mind, he molded out of the etheric, out of the ether, he created a pink rose, perfectly formed pink rose. And then he leant forward, and his hand went straight through my body, and he placed it into my heart center.
Wow.
And it was the most amazing experience. And then he took me over to this viewing screen, which I've seen before. You can't actually see anything as such until you go over there and you look. And I could see the top of the mobile home. I could see straight through the roof. And Fran was sitting on the edge of the bed, just leaning forward with her head down. And he said that she was panicking so much that we had to put her in stasis.
Wow. What was the purpose of the rose?
Yeah, well, when I got back home, I was talking to a friend of mine who was she taught astrology at a place called the White Eagle Lodge. There was a spirit called White Eagle back in the 20s and 30s, 40s. Talked to someone, communicated with someone called Grace Cook. Now, because she was well in with White Eagle Lodge, she was allowed to go into like the inner sanctum library with the really early books.
Mm-hmm.
And I just found myself telling her, I felt uncomfortable telling her because it just seemed a bit weird. 2 days later, this envelope came through my letterbox, and she said, I looked in a couple of the early books of his communications with Grace Cook. And in 2 of those books, he said that where they reside, these masters, if you like, he said they can create a pink rose through the ether in the palm of our hand, and they place it into your heart center, and it's to do with the Christ consciousness.
Wow.
It's absolutely amazing.
Yep.
Amazing.
Okay. So what was the final wash up with Area 51?
Well, the final washout is that Fran's never going back to America again.
Wow.
I wanted to go back. I wanted to retrace my steps, and she said, you'll be absolutely stupid. And don't forget what Telos told you. You've got to be more sensible. Now, I
Okay.
don't know. I haven't gone back anyway.
All right. Well, we've got a little bit of time left, Mike. Every time I hear the term light beings, you know, the hair on the back of my neck stands up. You've had experience with light beings, and they've visited you, and they made you aware of numbers and symbols. So, who were these light beings, and what were the numbers and symbols that you were seeing?
Yes, I mean this was an absolutely amazing experience. I've just got to get the date here. I've got dates all over the place here. It was the 18th of June, 1994. Now, at the time, I have a back problem. I saved someone's life when I was 17. I ruptured 3 discs in my spine, and I used to slip my disc an awful lot, and it could take 2 or 3 months to recover. Well, this had happened at this point, so I had my mattress in the living room and next to the coal fire if I needed it, and I just slept in the living room. And this particular night, I was woken up at 2:50 a.m. And as I say, you wake up immediately, you know something is going to happen. I'm so used to it, it's gone on for so many years, I just sit there and prepare myself, prepare my mind to what is about to happen. I don't know what it's going to be. And then all of a sudden, this golden funnel, like the trombone end of a trombone, it came through the window. The narrow bit was outside, the large opening bit was inside, looking towards me. It was absolutely amazing. But then out of it started to come hundreds and hundreds of little stars, star-like objects coming out of the funnel, and they started dancing around at the top of the ceiling. And then came numbers and letters and symbols. Now, 2 or 3 years after this, I was looking into these letters, and some of them did look a bit like ancient Hebrew, but whether they were or not, I don't know. And they were all dancing around the top of the ceiling. But then I saw coming out of the funnel were 2 beings. They were horizontal, and in the funnel, they only looked about a foot long.
Right.
But as they came out into the room, you never saw it happen. They just immediately went to about 6'2", 6'3". And they came, I was laying on my back, I had my head up against the chair, and they came and hovered over the top of me, face down, looking at me. They looked like fine chiseled marble statues, but they were, obviously it was life. But it was so incredibly beautiful, it was perfect. And they were hovering over the top of me, and then they entered me, they went into my body. When they'd done that, I had this incredible rush of energy. I saw it, oh, as they came into me. And then above me was this incredible light, the most amazing white, bright light you could ever see. And I knew at that moment I was going to have to go into that light. It was so perfect, I thought, no, I can't go into that light. I'm not perfect enough to go into that light. But I couldn't stop myself. I went into this light. And as soon as I was in this light, I was in complete and utter oneness. I mean, I've studied metaphysics since I was 16. And I know about this amazing white light. I went into this white light, and then there was no inside, no outside. It was like just pure oneness. And I then became aware of something else. There was something at the back of this complete and utter oneness, and it was like holding it all together. And then I realized that what it was love in large capital letters. It was love, and everything that, whatever it is that comes into creation, comes from love. I was then taken out of this white light, back onto the bed. The 2 light beings came out of my body, and they said to me that the information that you've received with these symbols, etc., will go into your consciousness, and at some point, it hasn't happened yet, but at some point, the knowledge and understanding of this will be released. They said it contained the knowledge of the universe. Seems rather a lot, but
Now, it almost sounds like a near-death experience.
it does. Yes, it does. Absolutely. And then they went back through the funnel, and then all the numbers, stars, letters, and symbols all went back through the funnel, and the funnel disappeared. And my whole body was electric. It was vibrating, and that electricity lasted for about three days.
Were you able to remember what the numbers and symbols were?
No, I did write some down under regression. Yeah, I've not got them with me, but they are in the book. I wrote down several pages which came out under regression, and that was a strange experience because I asked for a pen. Now I was under regression. My eyes were closed. I was laying on my back. I was holding the pen upside down, which you wouldn't be able to write more than 2 words
Hmm.
if you're holding it upside down. It's like this, and I started writing everything down. The pen just continued writing for these 9 pages, I think, altogether. I
Wow.
done. And at one point, he said to me, he tried, he thought the pen would run out, you see, before holding it in that position. So he was trying to take it out of my hand to give me a felt pen. And I just said, like in this really authoritative voice, I said, "Leave me alone. I know what I'm doing." And he stepped back and allowed me to continue. But I haven't managed to
So,
decipher.
sounds a little like Jim Penniston following the Rendlesham Forest incident, where he was able to write down a lot of zeros and ones, and it meant something. But
Like
and
the binary code, yes.
did you ever see a movie called Knowing with
Yes,
Nicolas Cage?
yes.
Again, that I thought about that when you talked about writing those down, but
Yes.
it was being guided.
Yes, yes. I also went to Rendlesham, and that was quite an amazing experience because I'd gone with a lady called Brenda Butler, who's one of the authorities on
Hmm.
Rendlesham.
Yep.
She used to go in there every single night for years, and she took us round through the night for 5 hours, going around it all. And when we got to one point, she said to me, "This is where the hot stones fall out of the sky." She said, "I've got a big bowlful at home." I said, "Oh, that's strange." And she was in front with my 2 friends. I was behind. And all of a sudden, something came whizzing by. It almost touched my face. She said they'd never quite hit you. And it went with a thud onto the ground. And the ladies in front were shouting out, "Stone, stone." And I said, "Yes, it's down here." And she said to me at the time, "If one lands, pick it up and put it on your cheek because they're very hot." And it
Hmm.
was very hot.
Yeah.
And I put it under the microscope when I got home, high viewing, and there was some strange. There's a strange wire that's connecting it.
Right. Mike, I wrote an article the last couple of days about the relationship issues that could exist between someone who's an experiencer and whether they're married or just living together, but the other person is not, and and the issues that can be caused when the other person doesn't believe
Mm.
what the
Big problem.
experiencer is telling them that is happening to them. Um, how important is it to be with someone that actually believes what you know what you're saying and what you're going through?
Well, I mean, knowing from my own experience, I would say obviously people have their own choices, but it's incredibly important because you're talking. I talk about it. Some people say, "How do you talk about it so calmly?" Well, because I've lived it for 70 years. I've never known a life any different. So it's I can talk in that way. But the, the thing is that it is such an incredible thing. We're talking about meeting people, other off-worlders or other dimensional beings, strange craft. It's amazing stuff. People can't even accept that there might even be life out there in these trillions of other
Hmm.
galaxies, for goodness sake. And if you can't express what you're feeling in your inner being with your loved one, your nearest and dearest, then that can break marriages, and it often does as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
Very, very difficult.
yeah. Couple of final questions. Do you have any advice for experiencers who live in denial?
Experiencers that live in denial, well, surely with experiencers, at some point they have to wake up and face what's going on. The problems I have is the people whose minds are so incredibly closed, it's beyond belief with all the evidence that we have why people can't open their minds, like they can't open their mind to what's going on now with the serious agendas behind what's going on. People just can't seem to see it. I
Yeah.
mean, I won't go too deeply into that because I'll probably get into trouble these days. But
No, I know what you're talking about. I notice it a lot on the forums online, and I kind of wonder why 75% of the people are on those forums anyway, because all they're doing is looking for opportunities to poke fun at people that are having experiences.
which is why I don't do too much these days. I mean, I've had 60 years of having fun poked at you, on something that is so incredibly important. I mean, even back when I was about 19, I was investigating a case with this lady. She'd seen something land in the field behind her garden, and she said she said, I told the man next door. She said, and he just didn't believe it. And he said to her, he said, if one landed in my garden and a space person got out, he said, I still wouldn't believe it. And that's what you're up against. They don't want to open their mind to these other realities.
Yeah. Terry Lovelace recounted an experience that he had at a seminar to me a few months ago, when a young man walked up to him and asked him how he could be taken, and he wanted to get some feedback from Terry on how he'd go about, being abducted. And Terry said, well, hang on, I've just given a talk about my malevolent experiences. Why would you want to be taken? Do you get that from people wanting to know how they can communicate with ETs?
Yeah. And my answer to them is, be very careful what you wish for, because it's not all love and light out there like it is on this planet. I was a bit naive when I was a lot younger. I used to think, well, if they're traveling through space, they must be on a higher spiritual plane than us. No, not all of them. Big problem.
Yeah.
But
so
we can
there's
escape it by changing our frequency.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of contactees say, that if you're putting out a low frequency, you're going to attract maybe some nasty aliens.
Like attracts like. You've got to be very, very careful. There's a lot of strange, not even aliens, but there's lots of stuff in the etheric worlds and the lower frequencies, the lower 4D world. You've got to be very, very careful. Elementals.
Right. Yeah, I mean, is there? I mean, people watching this today, is there a way they can practice getting onto a higher frequency level?
Absolutely, and it's quite simple. Meditation, giving out the right frequency, the right of love and light, caring for others, caring for the whole world. Not just human beings, but animals, the vegetable kingdom, Gaia herself. And this helps raise your frequency by trying to live on the love frequency, without a doubt.
Yeah. What about fear of contact? Maybe there's experiences out there that are worried. They have a fear of knowing what's coming. I mean, is there some way to overcome that?
Well, it's a difficult one. I've got a whole chapter up that I wrote on fear and how to deal with it in that book. But everybody's different, and everybody will react to it in different ways. But I gave several suggestions that might make people feel more comfortable if they've had a negative experience, and even if it's not negative, but they've got great fear going to bed, going to sleep, turn the light out. I think one of the good things is having a candle, light a candle near your bed. If some people would like a Bible, even put a Bible under the pillow, anything that would give them a bit more confidence. It's a difficult thing if you're on your own. I mean, Jim Sparks went through this in his book, and I met him in Nevada, and many people like him that think that they can escape, and you can't escape because they know exactly where you are. And this is why we need to understand it more. But I think we have to try and stay in the love frequency, or do whatever you feel comfortable with, especially going to bed at night when you're probably feeling most vulnerable. I think a candle is quite powerful, or even leaving a night light on.
Yeah. One final question on, and we'll finish it off on the skeptics. Kevin Briggs, do you know Kevin?
Don't know if I do.
Okay, Kevin. Now he's formerly from the UK, but now lives here in Florida, and I forget who it was. I think it might have been two very good friends that visited him on one occasion, and they were pretty much skeptics, and so he took it upon himself, said, "Come outside with me," and he was able to call up UFOs. So he made them believers. Is that something you're able to do as well?
Yes, I've done it many times in the past. I mean, I wouldn't say every time you do it, it's going to happen. Or you might get a feeling that you can do it for this person. When I first went to Warminster, I don't know much you know about Warminster in Wiltshire.
No.
No, but I mean, it came to head in the early 1964 when so many. Now it is a big military. It's a big military base, so you have to bear that in mind. But so many strange objects were being seen in the sky, etc., chasing people down the street, or cars were stopping, all sorts of things. So much so that the public of that village demanded that there is a meeting in the town hall to discuss what is going on. There was something genuine going on. People used to feel like the tiles on their roofs were being ripped off and thrown into the street. A lot of people experienced
Wow.
that. They'd go running out into the street looking up, and there's no damage, I can't see anything. But a lot of stuff went on in Warminster. And I started going there in 1970. I had some amazing, best years of my life there, experiences. And it went on until sort of the early 80s, I think, and then it started to it still goes on, but it started to sort
Yep.
of peter out a bit.
Okay.
I forget now.
Fascinating.
Well, I used to arrange for people then to come at a certain time. That's why I started telling you that, of course.
Right. Right.
And they would see it. They would see something.
Okay. Mike, we've just run out of time, but it's been a fascinating discussion. Absolutely loved. I mean, there's a lot more I could talk and ask you about, but I just wanted to get back to that where we started with your mother and the thing of importance that's going to happen, and it's the consciousness movement, and it's happening right now.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is the trigger, and this is what I must have been telling my mother. I mean, before this global lockdown, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, I thought to myself, well, I'm getting on a bit now. You know, I hope I'm going to see this go through before I die, because this is what they always told me.
Yep.
Of course, then this kicked off, and I think this is it, because
Yeah.
people now need to escape. This might wake enough people up.
Yeah. Well, in the UFO community now, a lot of the smart, when I say smart people, I guess the smart money is now predicting that the consciousness aspect is the whole key to full disclosure.
Yeah, but I mean, we've been promised full disclosure for decades.
Yeah, yeah.
We need it to come out, because but I mean, a proper full disclosure in the media, in the papers, and that might just wake people up. And all those people that have laughed at me down the years, it may just make them rethink. And I'm sure a lot of people feel that way.
Mike, thanks very much. It's been a pleasure having you.
Yeah, and to you as well, Dean. Look after yourself. Nice to talk to you.
You too. Same here. Thank you.
Bye.